suggest is that your secretariat to work with the AUC to explore what would be the best, and so that by January maybe we would have concluded which option is better, and then we agree on it and take it forward. So that's what I would suggest on that one. And of course, there's the issue of journalists who are being persecuted. And I think that one is as much our responsibility as it is yours. It has to be a joint program because you are on the ground, you have more knowledge of what's going on in each country about journalists, but also you are there to question these things every day in the countries. But we are doing our part to advocate for freedom of the press, publicly and privately. So we'll continue to do that, but I think if we club together, we may have more influence. It's the women, but the rights of the media should be an integral part of the rights that we are talking about. So I would say that, yes, we're doing our part. As you said, a lot more needs to be done, but not only by the AUC, by all of us. And then there were other issues about which you mentioned, but the discussions about the flagship projects, about first 10-year plan and all that, those will be discussed again here. So, and of course, we also need to work together to see how we can have a better media landscape in Africa. But let me say that this joint forum that we have today, and every year and maybe once a year, we have to touch base. And I think in the discussions of what relationship we should have, we should also work out what is the best way of meeting, maybe meet at regional level or whatever. I think let's start working on that so that we come up with a proper way. Maybe once in a while we come together, but we also meet at regional level. It's just a suggestion, but work together to concretize it. And of course, with Agenda 2063, we also work with a lot of partners like the ECA, the ADB, and the REX. And so I think it's important to also see how we can strengthen the work. I know ECA does have an annual meeting of editors and media owners. So let's see how that fits in, so that we indeed are able to not only meet but hold each other accountable, as you say, but not only hold the AUC accountable, but hold governments who have agreed to these decisions accountable. And if you are aware, as you are now on Agenda 2063, then you are able to say on health what is happening, what are the plans, and in every aspect. So I think we are very happy with what is going to happen. And of course, there is NEPAD also here in South Africa, and I think we should also rope them in all this so that they also assist you, because they are the implementing agency of the AU. But just to come back to Agenda 2063, it's a framework, as you said, not to be achieved in 2063, but to be evaluated by the rest of the world in 2063. But implementation has started, and it has to continue until we get there. And it's really to have an Africa that's integrated, so we must look at issues of integration. A continent that's prosperous, so we have to look at what would make the continent prosperous and how what progress is there. And it's also to have a peaceful continent, as Mahlati was saying, to silence the guns and to have less and less hotspots. Like now, I see you've put me on the program this evening and tomorrow, but I have to go to Angola to discuss some hotspots. So we need to get to a point where the hotspots don't consume a lot of our time. But we also need to have a continent with this agenda that is driven by its citizens. And I think that's very important because, as you yourself said, before the AU was looked at as a club of heads of state who meet and go, but we need to involve more and more our citizens. And we are trying, but there's still a lot more to do to involve our citizens. And of course, that way, if we are peaceful, integrated, prosperous, driven by our citizens, indeed we'll be very influential in the world. So that's what it's all about. It's about our people enjoying prosperity, shared prosperity, enjoying peace, and being the drivers of this continent. The first 10-year plan emphasizing a number of areas that we think we cannot move without. And those are the skills revolution, because it's clear that having made the assessment of what are the skills gap in the continent that we have to fill before we can truly implement Agenda 2063, they are massive. So that's why we have said we need a skills revolution. But we also need it because we have a young population which needs to get the skills, the education, so that they can innovate, they can create jobs, and they can get decent jobs. So, and we have to also shift the emphasis from social sciences. Yes, we still need them, but we need to shift more towards the STEM areas, which is science, technology, engineering, maths, and of course, with that, research and innovation. We need to empower our women. They are the majority of that this youthful continent. Infrastructure. Now, agriculture, agro-processing, industrialization, trade, investment, democracy, peace, and inclusive and good governance. The first speaker talked about tourism, which is very important, and he talked about more sectors now going to be using robots, and tourism will always remain people-centered. Of course, but not in Africa. I hope we are not going to be wanting to use robots in Africa. I think I would go crazy working in a shop floor just with robots, with no people. But at the same time, Robots don't pay tax. They don't contribute to the pension scheme. But we still need tax for education, for health. So in Africa, I think we should go slow on the robots. And of course, for tourism to succeed, we need infrastructure. Nobody wants to go to a dark city where there is no electricity. They don't want to visit a village where there is no electricity. So infrastructure, energy is critical. You quoted France. It's true, France probably has the biggest per capita tourism. They receive more tourists than their own population a year. But they make sure that there are no blackouts there. There is electricity everywhere. And they make sure that the cities are really functioning and held by senior people. That's why you can have a Chirac, who was the mayor of Paris, becoming the president of France, because they've understood that those cities need to have very strong and experienced leaders to lead them. But also, tourism without proper transport infrastructure. Our continent, I would say, without fear of contradiction, is the most beautiful continent and has almost everything that a tourist would need. But moving from the airport where you arrive to the mountain where you want to hike or the sea is a challenge. And you miss out also when you fly all the time. You miss out on the beautiful, spectacular landscape. So transport is very important. Yes, air transport to bring people, but rail, road, to take people around. So that's very critical to improve tourism as well as other things. Of course, technology. If people can't communicate, they won't come. If they think once you are there, you are cut off from the rest of the world. They want to communicate all the time. They want to send pictures of what they are taking all the time. So communication is going to be very important. They want to eat. Not only tourists, all of us. Agriculture is very important. I've spoken to scientists everywhere. I've never had a scientist that has any idea of something that can substitute food for human beings in the foreseeable future. So food is going to be necessary, essential, and so we must. And of course, we are encouraging the institutions of learning to encourage young people to study agriculture. I was in Cape Town last week at a forum called RU Forum, which is a network of universities in Africa. It started with a few universities in East Africa and Southern Africa. I think when they started, there were about 8 of them, because they realized that the professors in agriculture were getting old, but there were no young people in the pipeline who were going to replace them. And the research in agriculture was going down because there weren't enough masters and PhDs to do the research. So they came together to see how they can boost this. And we had a discussion with them about 3 years ago, and we said to them, no, don't just be a few in East Africa and Southern Africa. I think by that time there were maybe 20-something. We said, just spread out to the rest of the continent. And that was 2014. 2016, they met in Cape Town. They now have a network of 60 universities. And in a space of 12 years since the first started, they've at least trained 2,000 masters and PhD students. They have encouraged them to innovate. In Cape Town, they had a competition for innovation, and they had about 15 who won, but they say they had 800 entries, which shows that young people really want to innovate. And the innovation has to solve Africa's problem. It can't just be innovation for the sake of it. And it was very interesting, the things that they came up with to address problems that we see. Some were addressing agricultural problems, most of them. But there was one, for instance, who said his friend lost a sister from childbirth because the village was too far from the clinic. And he decided he must innovate to try and stop women dying at childbirth. And he came up with a fascinating innovation, a monitor that you use yourself at home, monitors the heart of the child, blood pressure of the mother, the temperature, and if anything is wrong, it has red. Even if you can't read the numbers, it tells you red, then you must start making your way to the clinic. And that gives you an early indication. And the mother can use it at home herself. It doesn't have to have the health worker, which I thought was a great innovation. But of course, we need to link them with business and financial institutions to see how to actually commercialize what they are doing. So, and agro-processing is going to be very important. New seeds that can resist drought, that can resist diseases, urban agriculture. They were also innovating with agriculture without soil, so that you don't need to have a farm. You can do it at home, in a warehouse, or wherever. So these are some of the things that it's Agenda 2063 in action. Of course, the universities were also telling us what to tell heads of state. And because we think this skills revolution is so important, we have formed a committee of heads of state of 10. One of them was at that meeting, the president of Mauritius, who's a scientist herself. So I'm just making these examples to show that we're not waiting until Agenda 2063. Things are happening. Last week, I was in Lome, Togo. There was a summit on maritime, because people have been joking with us that Africans somehow don't like the sea. We don't work on the sea. And some of them say, well, maybe we ran away from the sea during slavery and we've never looked back towards the sea again. And it may be true, because how come we have two oceans, Atlantic and the Indian? We have two seas, Mediterranean and the Red Sea. We hardly own, and 90% of our exports and imports are transported through the sea, but we don't own that transport. It's owned by other people. Very few countries on the continent have fleets that take their goods out and into the continent. But you'll be surprised that the country that has probably more fleet, a bigger fleet than anyone else, is a landlocked country. Because sometimes people think the sea is important only for those who are coastal or island states. No, the sea is important for everyone, because that's how you take your goods out, that's how you bring goods in, whether you are landlocked or coastal. So, and Ethiopia owns fleets of ships that take its things, and it's landlocked, but it has understood that the sea, the maritime highways are very important for transport. Our fish, most of our fish is taken by people outside our continent, not ourselves. Our fish industry is very rudimentary. And yet other people are striving on the fish that is on the sea. Tourism is also rudimentary. We only do coastal tourism. We hardly do floating tourism. We see large cruises coming, docking at our ports and leaving. We are not part of that. The employment that goes with that, we are losing. And yet, we were having discussions with the Norwegian Ship Owners Association, and they were telling us, of course, the Norwegian Ship Owners Association have the largest fleet in the world from the time of the Vikings. So they use the sea very effectively. Their economy is basically around the sea. And they were telling us, of course, that they don't have enough Norwegians to be on their fleet. So they train Filipinos, Thais, Chinese, to bring things to our shores. Why can't we say they must train our own people, at least to work on those ships before we can have our own? But I'm very happy, and also just training in the maritime space, there's lots of things that we can train on in the maritime space. People are looking at deep sea mining. Some of the people have even mapped out what minerals are on our seas without even telling us. So maritime is one of very important for tourism, very important for economic growth. It's the next frontier for economic growth. Everybody is talking about the blue ocean. So that's what we were talking about. But it's part of Agenda 2063 in action. And we are, and hopefully some of you can participate. A charter was agreed upon there, but that charter is more about security. So we have agreed that we are going to have an annexure to that charter that looks at development issues, and we are going to develop it. And so maybe those who are interested, we can invite you as a TIF to send a delegation to those discussions if you want, because we need to reclaim the sea as an economic space for us Africans. So, of course, there are lots more other things. We are trying to get African countries to come together to create a single African aviation market. That's difficult because somehow we make agreements with outside people, outside airlines, and we don't make agreements amongst ourselves. And as a result of that, we have lost 40% of our own aviation market. And if we don't do something about it, we are going to lose even more. So what we have decided is that this was supposed to have been implemented in year 2000. Nothing has happened. Year 2000, we had 60% of the share of the market. Now we only have 20%. So we have lost by not implementing our own decisions. So what we have agreed now is that we should just get those countries that are ready. We've got about 14 countries that are now ready to work, that are working together to see what they can do amongst themselves. Because if we wait until all 54 are ready, it means we will have to go at the pace of the slowest, which is not ideal. So also, we must also, as the media and ourselves, look at our heritage. And that's part of tourism as well. Africa has huge heritage, which we have not really popularized enough. Maybe the only thing that has been popularized are the Egyptian pyramids. Some of you may not even know that there are more pyramids in Sudan than in Egypt. But people don't know because we don't popularize. Things like maybe the city of Carthage in Tunisia has been popularized a bit, but there are lots of things. The Zimbabwe, Great Zimbabwe, Timbuktu, the Makondes, our paintings, our sculptures, our gold, our rock paintings. These are the things that, as media people, you should be really looking at, and as tourism people also. The rich biodiversity that I say, there's land, there's ocean, majestic mountains, rivers, lakes, forests, deserts, the savannas, islands. What is it that we don't have? Maybe that's what we should mention. And of course, now we are home to the second or third largest film industry, Nollywood. Writers, musicians, actresses, actors, talent is there. Now we're seeing African fashion as well. African fashion. So Africa has a lot, and we need to popularize it. I mean, we need to make it cool. We need to make it cool and sexy. So, and our young people are very keen to learn, to travel across the continent. They are technologically savvy, and girls are more assertive, as they should be. And so everything is there. We just need to make sure we push by putting it out there. Of course, Mahlatsi, when something is wrong, you say it. Nobody says you mustn't say when something is wrong. You say it. You say it. When something is happening, you report about it. So that's all we are asking. We don't want praise singers. No. We just think we should report on what's going on in Africa, and there's a lot. So just do that. Of course, the program director or somebody, or maybe the DDG talked about ownership of the media. It's good to also examine who owns our media. Do they have the same perspective or not? How do we make sure that they buy into this perspective? But also, how do we make sure that there's more and more people who have the same perspective who own the media? Because in some countries that I will not name, you can buy 4 newspapers and the stories would be the same, and you wonder why you bought all 4. I will not name those countries, but some of you may guess. And it's not just it's the same stories told from different angles. No, it's the same story from the same angle. So I think diversity in ownership will also assist to be able to tell the African narrative. So your responsibility, I will not say a lot, but I was also interested in, there are lots of reporters that you have, war reporters, you have all sorts of reporters, but now I see they are also reporters, developmental reporters. So maybe we also need to encourage developmental reporters to look at all these things that I'm talking about. But this was just to just give you a rough idea, because details would be given. And of course, public broadcasters have a very important role in society to inform, to constructive criticism, but also to promote talent within the continent. And it's good you were having this over the weekend, so that's what should be happening. But of course there is now the social media. How do we use social media to inform, to debate? So I think all these things should be discussed. But I also want to just leave you with one thing. Of course, the training of journalists as well is important, because if you are trained from the perspective of other continents and not from the perspective of the African continent, then when you are a journalist, you will also come with that reporting. But Agenda 2063 is for everyone. I think at some stage, as the media, you should say how you are implementing Agenda 2063 within your own space. How are you ensuring that the skills revolution within your own space? How are you ensuring the empowerment of women within your own space? All the things that are in Agenda 2063, a lot of them are applicable in every sector. So it's not just to report about what the AU is doing, what the governments are doing, but also as the media. Yes, you are doing well, I can see Mahlatsi is there, but really within the media, women, young people, technology, everything you should also be looking at within your own space and say, this is our Agenda 2063 as the media. This is where we want to be in 2063 as the media. So with those few words, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.